This here is just one of them little pieces, okay? One of them little pieces. And you see the trees like fibers, okay? Some of it stays preserved due to the location and the moisture and weather that it gets. And you see the sap that petrified. This here is pretty preserved. Most everything looks like that. So all this hollow area here, trees like fibers, all this fell away. It's just, it was so massive. And remember, I can show it to you, but I can't understand it for you.
So this gets to, you know, another thing that I want to talk about is this whole idea that sap is not quartz, and you know, it's a different material with different qualities, and it can't possibly be true that sap is quartz. Now, first of all, again, this gets back to what I said before, is that if there's been some kind of a petrification process that doesn't involve pair mineralization over millions of years, or even a rapid pair mineralization, but involves you know, some kind of a high force event, then you're going to get a transmutation of elements. So to say this cannot possibly be that based on its current structure, to me is not, you know, it's ruling something out that doesn't need to be ruled out. So clearly sap petrifies to things like amber, right? That's what we're told. Now the interesting thing about sap, and I started looking into this week, is sap comes in every color, right? So when we think amber, you know, if I do a search for amber, there's a bit of variation when it comes to amber. Amber heard. Amber, how do I search for amber without getting amber heard? Amber sap. There we go. That was funny. Wasn't expecting that. So you can see it's all this kind of yellowy brown, you know, color, just like you see coming off of the tree. And you can imagine this hardening and petrifying and maybe capturing bugs in it. And, you know, this is where you get your whole Jurassic Park narrative, where they go in with a syringe and they extract the DNA of the dinosaurs and we're going to bring them back to life, right? Because it's been preserved in the sap for all this time. So, yeah, so petrified tree, you know, petrified sap is going to become amber, not quartz, according to some. And I would say that under certain circumstances, it becomes amber, and under certain species of tree, it might become this. And other species of tree are going to have their own chemical constitution of sap. And so that got me thinking, well, what kinds of constitutions are there? So I searched for orange tree sap, and I found that, wow, tree sap can be bright orange, and you know, it can take on all kinds of different colors. It can be green. You can get green tree sap. So if this is going to petrify and harden, what's that going to look like when you're done? Is it going to look like amber, or is it going to look like something else? Yes, amber is definitely sap, but the question is all sap amber when it's petrified? And I don't think so. I could be wrong. I'm definitely going to look into this more, and I'm going to talk with my buddy who's got a PhD in molecular chemistry, and you know, I'm gonna check stuff out, right? So here's red sap, right? What's that going to look like when it petrifies? I don't know, maybe ruby or something. You know, what happens if this gets hit with plasma and it doesn't just harden? What would it become then? That's the thing we got to be asking. What is this stuff going to become when it's hit by some kind of a high power force? Because, you know, we know that there's been 5 great dyings off in the geological record, even according to the mainstream. they say it's comet strikes, and that wiped out the dinosaurs, and what are the forces involved in something like that? What are the forces involved in a high level plasma event? So, see the nodule? That's all sap. And now as he pulls it off, it starts to get squished. So there you go, right? There's at least one absolutely 100% clear case of where geodes can come from. Because look at these little balls. This is just one tree. So if that tree petrifies, what's going to happen to those? They're going to turn to stone, and then they're going to break off, and then they're going to be what we call geodes. I love synchronicity. I was, kind of debating with somebody about this topic on Facebook. Not that I'm qualified to debate it whatsoever, because I'm clearly, suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. I haven't studied this stuff. A lot of this I'm new to, so I'm just trying to figure stuff out as I go. So don't take my word for any of this stuff. Look into it. But this whole idea of sap is not quartz. It was interesting because somebody sent me I'm going to read it here. Sent me a message on Telegram. Wait, let me see. Sorry. So this guy's saying to me, and this was totally unrelated to this subject, but he just out of the blue, as I'm pondering these subjects, writes me, I also think piezoelectricity is a huge factor. Piezo means pressed, and electric means amber. So pressed amber. So if you get into the etymology of the word electric, it actually comes from amber, and amber is made to is used to make electrets, which we're going to look at in just a moment. So when most people think of piezoelectricity, they're thinking of quartz crystals, because piezo means pressed. So basically, if you put a mechanical pressure on a quartz crystal, then this is not my area of expertise, but that gives an electrical charge, or it basically, you're converting mechanical to electrical, right? Piezoelectric effect. So this quartz crystals are used for this in watches. They're used for this in all of our electronic devices in order to for time, for all kinds of different things. So piezoelectricity is a huge factor. So the word is coming from pressed amber, which is interesting, because what does that have to do with quartz? And that's what most people are thinking of when they think of the piezoelectric effect. But amber is tree sap or resin. Electrets, which are this what we're going to talk about here, are man-made piezoelectric crystals, which seem to have very little public research into them, yet they're used in every single microelectronic that uses a microphone in existence. Man-made electrets are made with melted tree rosin and carnauba tree wax, and then they're cooled in the presence of extremely high voltage. Carnauba wax is the gloss on a certain Brazilian tree's leaf. The holly tree leaves also have a noticeable glossy wax like the carnauba wax. In other words, piezoelectricity is based on tree leaf wax and tree sap resin and quartz crystals. So in other words, an amorphous fluid, sap or resin, amorphous meaning it doesn't have a crystalline form, when it's heated and in the presence of high voltage, will take on, hold, and slowly release an electric charge over time. So I can't answer the whole how does sap transmute to quartz, but to deny the obvious empirical evidence and claim claim I see rock seems a little narrow-minded to me when people are looking at this stuff. While also citing the piezoelectric effect as proof of why it's not possible. It seems hasty to me, especially now that I'm aware that rubies can be made in a microwave in seconds. This is what I was describing before. There's your little ceramic lid and the votive. He's taking...
People do really amazing work with these little microwave kilns.
He's taking chromium oxide and sandblasting or tumbling
confuse
lapidary.
glass,
Sandblasting, that would be sand, so silica, I suppose, mixed with chromium oxide, puts it in a microwave. He tries different experiments that fail, and he finally gets one that works well. And literally, here the crucible breaks because the heat was too intense for it, because the glass was too thin. So then he goes for this thicker glass like you use for a votive candle, puts in a couple of powders, and gets out.
And also it's got a tiny
from a microwave in 10 seconds.
Into the seed material at the bottom of this candle holder.
Also,
what we're looking for in the proper positioning of these aluminum fibers is to have them about halfway that plasma. Only about 10 seconds.
There you have it. Rapid petrification in literally seconds. So here's the finished result. And he shows that it's ruby by using
Turn that on.
The UV light. Now these are raw rubies. And I'm not an expert on this, but as I understand it, you could then use different cutting tools to cleave this in different ways. So if it's ruby, I'm assuming that it has the crystalline structure of a ruby, even though it looks like a blob. But it's, he shows
UV on there, but
the UV light that it what is it? It fluoresces. Is that what they call it?
Wave. Now, these are not the finest quality rubies by a long shot, but considering the minimal amount of effort and equipment needed to make them, this is highly impressive to me. I'm certain with a little more refinement of the methods, you could create even much larger rubies than this. I'm just not certain yet on how to go about it.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of different gemstones that are being made synthetically. And, to determine like the value of a gemstone, it's the native gemstones that are the most valuable. And there's all kinds of different techniques for, determining whether something was man-made or made by nature. Yeah, so let's check this out on electrics. This is a fascinating subject that I didn't know anything about until yesterday.
G'day everyone. Today we're making electrets. We're going to use the traditional recipe, dates right back to the early days of electrostatic research. We're going to use this cannabua wax, which is a natural wax, comes from an African tree. It's particularly non-conductive, and it's the hardest known natural wax. It has a unique molecular structure, which is pretty much ideal for making electrets. Here we have white rosin, same stuff gymnasts might use on their hands, or rock climbers. This is a fairly coarse crystalline stuff that I got quite cheaply. And these are mixed approximately 50-50 by mass and melted together. The end result is quite brittle because of the hardness of both of these materials, so we plasticize it with about plus 10% by mass pure beeswax. This is just normal white beeswax as you might make a candle.
Beeswax seems to me like the bee version of sap.
Or for preserving, or whatever the heck else people use beeswax for. Again, this was cheap, just got it, and it seems to work fine. You could probably use paraffin wax or any number of other things, but beeswax is more likely to be miscible with these two once they're melted. So,
yeah, Willie in the chat says if you rub amber with a woolen cloth, it becomes electrostatically charged. Yeah, so amber's got electric, qualities big time.
Into the beaker they go, and I've got it here on the stir plate. with a magnetic stirrer, melt them down, you get this sort of deep amber coloured solution. It outgassed a little bit for a while too, and there was sort of a turpentine odor, which might have been some residue in the.
So this is where he starts to.
The mold, as you can see, has.
So he's got this between two plates, and you know, I don't understand the whole electrical stuff, but basically he's going to charge this thing up.
There's two pieces of PCB material for electrodes. They're covered with Teflon tape as an insulator and also as a release agent. In between, there's a PMMA mold which I laser cut. It's just a cylindrical cavity in there. It's also a thermocouple, so I can tell what's going on temperature-wise. The whole thing is polarized to about 10,000 volts using this Gronatron power supply. And the material's poured in hot. I preheat the mold a little bit with a hot air gun just to make sure it doesn't freeze instantly to the sides, and allow it to cool down back to room temperature before demolding it.
So basically what he's heated this thing up, 10,000 volts, and this is a device that he's created that it's got different electrodes and transistors. I have no idea how stuff works, but
it's a kind of differential electrometer. It only responds to changes in electric field, but it's bipolar, and it will tell you which polarity of charge is approaching or being, well, essentially the change of electric field around
I know
these
some
antennas.
people like that.
You can see it's got 6 transistors, 6 resistors, 2 LEDs, and that's about it. Circuit diagram wise, I built this to pick up. This is the circuit diagram. Fun for us. We have another one here.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting.
They're also pretty darn useful, as I'm about to show you. Okay. So, here we have PCB material, double-sided, glued to a piece of glass. This is basically an old-fashioned electrophorus. We have another one here that I've earthed, and I'm going to take the Electret material that we made earlier. I'm going to wrap it up in the alfoil to protect it. Okay, so
it also has polarity.
See, just a brown-looking waxy thing. Not a particularly good moulding job. There's some shrinkage, etc. I've still got to work on that. But this froze in an electric field of about 10,000 volts a centimetre, so it's got quite a strong electric charge embedded in it. It's actually raising the hair on the back of my hand. Anyway, so if we take our electrometer here and we approach it with one side.
So if it can take on a charge and hold that charge, what would happen if it got hit with lightning or a plasma event?
You can see that we get the red, focus. The red LED here lights up. Now if I turn it around, blue LED lights up, and you can note that when I pull away, the opposite LED will light up.
So an amorphous fluid with heat has been hardened,
see the actual
and it has
electric field
polarity.
It's actually not that strong, but this Electret hasn't been made for very long, so it's probably still in the process of reversing
Again,
the
this
pitch
isn't
surface. And I'm going to test it.
This isn't proof that sap petrifies to quartz, but I think it's pretty fascinating how this is coming about, what its properties are.
Again tomorrow to see if it still has the same polarity. This particular Electret is well known for going through a polarity reversal 24 to 48. It'll now light the red LED.
So he's
also the blue, obviously.
Yeah, so he changes polarity. So he's basically using this thing to charge up this.
That's working quite well.
And then
there's a lot more things you can do with Electrets.
I'll
follow up.
I jumped ahead too much.
Do the same thing again. It'll now light the red LED.
Yeah, so he turns it over and he shows the polarity of it. So it's just an interesting thing. I will put that into the chat, and that was the same video. So yeah, there's not a whole lot out there on Electrets on YouTube, but you know, this gets into the whole amber thing and terpenes, resin. It's complicated stuff. I wish I knew more about the. I wish I'd studied chemistry, real science, applicable science. But this is looking at terpenes, and this is the etymology of the word electric, which is coming straight from amber, which is also pale gold. Fascinating. So this was sent to me by somebody, I don't recall who it was. This is a tree stump that is just oozing amber, and he or she who sent this to me said that it had hardened basically to stone just in the open air. And tell me that doesn't look like quartz, but it's just sap. But maybe it becomes something different if you hit it. I don't know. But that is, that's looking very quartzy to me, not so sappy. And then I've talked about this in other streams, just this whole idea of how different biological materials can be infused with all of the different elements of the periodic table. So trees can become metal, and shells can become metal. Here you've got, this is petrified tree, this is agatized. So I'm sure some of this is quartz, but the official narrative is that that has basically infiltrated the wood over millions of years of time, and that's how that got in there. And what I would suggest is that there's probably different ways in which the trees can petrify. And some of them are going to result in something that looks like this, where there's no agatization, right? This is petrified wood, and you can see how it's breaking down in all the different colors, but there's no agate in here. Maybe you might be able to find some quartz somewhere in here, but this is not agatized. So my instinct tells me that this kind of petrified wood did not come about in the same way as that other petrified wood. One might involve flooding with high mineral content water, and the other might involve electricity or melting through heat. And here you can see, cross-section of petrified tree. This has clearly got some quartz in it. So some crystallization happens after the fact, just like, a geode, the inside, the crystals grow towards the center. And so you get these radial lines as the crystals are growing, like what you see here. So was this originally hollow? And maybe this was how the tree was transporting fluids. I don't know exactly what's going on here, why it's shaped like this, but it's, to me, I'm open to lots of different potential explanations. And this is just getting back to the idea someone said in a stream that I saw yesterday, like, why couldn't some of these mountains just be gigantic crystals that formed, when the Earth was young? And I don't see any reason why that's not also possible. This is fascinating to me. I think Roger Spur from Mud Fossil University theorized that selenite, which is what this appears to be, but maybe it's just quartz, I don't know, that this is actually parts of the tendons of titans. And, perhaps, I don't know. But there's probably some mountains out there that were just crystalline also.
You see how they always have the flat edges and the random ledges, like here, the flat edges and the random ledges, these little pieces, it's like fibers. See that? Take a good look at the way it breaks down flat. Okay, go down here one more time and I'll show you once again just how large, massive these, just the branches alone. So these are all, just this little piece right here would be one of them. How small and insignificant it is, and that's from a branch. And then you've got all these gaps throughout here. I'll put a couple pictures in where these gaps are so large, 10 feet, 5 feet, 20 feet, you could walk through them. They're massive. And we're like walking on the top of the branches that are piled up and piled up. All right, I'm going to end it here. This here is just one of them little pieces, okay? One of them little pieces. And you see the trees like fibers, okay? Some of it stays preserved due to the location and the moisture and weather that it gets. And you see the sap that petrified. This here is pretty preserved. Most everything looks like that. So all this hollow area here, trees like fibers, all this fell away. It's just, it was so massive. And remember, I can show it to you, but I can't understand it for you. As crazy as it sounds, the gold and quartz. The quartz is the petrified sap of all different colors from different plants, trees, bush, vegetation. The same with the quartz crystals, whether they're small or very large. It's just part of the tree, part of the sap, part of the lifeblood of the plant, tree, bush, whatever it was. Above ground, underground. It's just what happens. It's part of the tree, even the crystals. But the gold runs with the quartz. They always run together, unless they were broken out through rocks breaking and getting into a river or hard rock mining. But the gold and quartz, like copper and many other of the metals, always come from hard rock mining. They ran with the quartz, which is the petrified sap. They were in the tree. I could show it to you, but I can't understand it for you. Whatever purpose it was in God's original creation, you know, it's just kind of like Avatar. They always put truth in plain sight. You know, they plug into the trees. They're alive through the energy. But I'm not saying that we plugged into the trees, but it's something similar to that. The tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I'm telling you, this is self-evident. Quartz and gold always run together. If the quartz is the petrified sap, it's a common denominator. And I always teach in science it was deposited. It's never deposited. Deposited from where? From the highest mountain to under the ground. What could deposit it? Where did it come from? Use a little logic and common sense. Gold and silver and a lot of these minerals are found worldwide, from the top of the highest mountains to deep underground. It's all tree remains. It wasn't deposited in it. Deposited from where? You know, you can't, it don't fit. This is a common denominator. But I just want to show you this. This is incredible. Same thing with the mica. The mica was the bark of the tree. The asbestos, which is a great fire retardant and insulator, it was part of the trees for the purpose of probably the gold, like a conductor, or the copper. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, it's the truth. Look at this. This is incredible. All right, I'm going to end this one here. And then another thing is the quartz. They use it in computers, in microchips, everything. It retains memory. So that's another thing. The sap retains memory, the quartz. Somebody smart out there could put it all together. But they use quartz in electronics because it retains memory. And it was part of the tree, the same as the gold, the silver, the copper, uranium, palladium. All of it. All right. And I'll show you what this looks like to most people. Like this, it don't look like anything because it's hidden. All this. Let me get back over here. Like I showed you, this is just one of them little pieces. And everything under this grassland right here where I'm at is the exact same thing. And here's your flat edge. More of the quartz and the petrified sap. Come around here where it doesn't get a lot of the elements. And this doesn't even look petrified, but it's hard as stone. It is stone. It's petrified. All right, people.
I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray. A tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree.